Welcome to AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties with English degrees or those who just like to overanalyze everything. I'm Jody.
I'm Jen.
And I'm Monty.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift.
Welcome to another episode of AP Taylor Swift. Today, summer school is in session. This is another summer school episode. We are revisiting some of our old themes that we've covered in prior episodes and putting them in context of the Tortured Poets Department and all the new songs that we've been so fortunate to receive since we first started recording this podcast. So today, our topic that we are revisiting is metaphor. Jen, would you like to give us a brief summer school lesson on metaphor?
I genuinely feel like I talk about the concept of a metaphor almost every episode, so I will say this very quickly.
Yeah, we did it a lot in the last episode. I was like, oh, we should just combine these into one.
There's so many good metaphors.
She does well.
Yeah, poetry has metaphors. All writing has metaphors. Poetry uses it to a significantly greater amount, usually. Metaphors have two parts, and that is what we can use to analyze metaphors. The parts are, one, what is the meaning behind the metaphor? What is the artist, the writer trying to communicate? Or what are you at least interpreting as the audience? And then there's the image. So why this particular image for the metaphor? And I'm going to go right into my first song as the example of it, because I actually don't know why this image. That's usually the fun question to ask metaphors, but of why this image to get this message across. I have no answers. I'm very curious to discuss this. I chose Down Bad, which is track number 3, written by Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff. Obviously, the metaphor is alien abduction. We have lines such as, "Did you really beam me up?" in a cloud of sparkling dust. Just to do experiments on, tell me I was a chosen one, show me that this world is bigger than us, then sit me back where I came from. That is a large chunk of the song. There are different ways she does it, but this is the core of what she's getting to in the song is someone in a relationship abducted her as an alien abduction, gave her an incredible experience, an out-of-the-world experience, if you will, and then left. Dropped her back off, left her back the way everything was, and she feels abandoned.
Yeah, I think the otherworldliness is the key here. Whenever I hear somebody referencing extraterrestrialness in art, I assume it is to try to capture an out-of-world experience, something that feels like something that you could not possibly find on this mundane earth. It has to be even more, even beyond, even bigger than whatever we are used to. That to me is the reason to go there with a metaphor, because if it was something here, then there's like two forces. Sometimes you want to ground people, and when you're trying to ground them, you use earthy kind of metaphors. And then there's things that are so lofty and so big and so nebulous, and that's when you go kind of to space.
So it's interesting because I actually see it as using an alien abduction here. The first question I have is this real? The idea of belief, of disbelief. So for me, using an alien abduction as the metaphor, I go to, are people going to believe you, right? Like do this whole idea of, I don't trust that what you're saying actually happened.
Maybe you don't believe it yourself.
Right. Maybe you don't believe, like, did I really just experience this and I have no real proof?
Which kind of still holds to what I'm saying, because again, I think
it's similar. I don't think it was totally different.
No, you're right. In reality, the groundingness is what I'm using as the opposite, right? Like
yes.
Things that are really real are down to earth, or like they ground you in reality, whereas something lofty.
From our eco-criticism episode, if you will, the role of nature.
Yeah, whereas something that is otherworldly might be something that's not that easy to believe or unrealistic.
I think we could, along with that, not just belief, but also understanding, because there's a comparison here of if I was abducted by aliens, the experience I had there, no one would ever understand what I went through because it is so otherworldly. It's so unbelievable.
Unrelatable.
Imagine the isolation. If we stick with this metaphor as if it were...
Isolation's a really good reason too.
Yeah. If this truly happened and you got truly abducted by aliens and you came back, you would be no one in the world would ever
Ever.
understand what you went through, because it's never happened to anyone else. It's this completely, you went through something that no one else has ever been through before.
No one else has experienced.
Yes. Like, why in the world was experience hard for me to come up with? Yes.
And it was life-changing. Like, not only is this something that is just an isolating experience, and isolating is a negative word. You could have this incredible in an outrageous experience, but it is so isolating because no one else can relate, or no one else maybe even believes you. No one else can see it or experience it. It is something that only happened to you. And this is not, I don't think it's used in a positive way.
No, we go to a verse further down. We have, "Did you take all my old clothes just to leave me here naked and alone in a
Right.
field in my same old town that somehow seems so hollow now? They'll say I'm nuts if I talk about the existence
Right.
of you."
And then the bridge, because obviously the bridge, hostile takeovers. But I loved your hostile takeover. So loving, quote unquote, the abuse.
This is kind of the paradox of all things outer space, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Outer space is both very scary and the great unknown, but also very mesmerizing and fascinating to humans.
Right.
We have this knowledge that it's very lonely and you're not home. You're out of our comfort zone. You're somewhere in the distance, isolated by yourself. But at the same time, it's the next great frontier. It's like, oh, it's so incredible to be the first humans to be able to go out there. So it is this paradox.
And the meaning behind the metaphor, because we've been talking about the image.
I was gonna say.
The meaning behind it, she's using this to describe a love that she's experienced.
Yeah.
So that's not good.
Well, it is and it isn't. This is the love bomb song that she talked about,
Yes.
right?
Yes. So it's not a good form of feeling in love.
Even the words love bomb, I mean, it's a bomb, but it's love.
Yeah. It's not good.
It's overwhelming, it sounds like.
It's negative. Love bombing is negative. It's when you go, I mean, Jen, did you look up the actual definition, or would you like me to?
Yeah, love bombing is just when someone comes in and treats you incredible and compliments you, makes everything wonderful, and then they leave, which 100% is what's happening here.
Yeah, because it's not positive. It's not actual love.
Which this song is, in retrospect, can say that. However, this song, the meaning of it to me, and why it's such an interesting metaphor, is this is immediately at the end of it where it's not good. It's going to be a hard experience, but it's still in that moment of, but it was also incredible at the same time. When I was in it, before I was abandoned, I was having a great time. I was the chosen one. I was doing all this. Was it worth it? Probably not. But it wasn't a bad experience beginning to end.
So so here's where I differ in the experience of the song. It sounds like you're thinking that this is a relationship that is over. I feel like it's something she's still in, because it's, what if I can't have us? So she's like, what if this is going to end? What if this is not forever? Versus I can't have us.
The lines
It's
show
over.
me that this world is bigger than us and sent me back where I came from. I think the sent back, it feels like she's not there anymore.
I imagine the song, if we're staying with the metaphor, the moment she was dropped back on Earth,
Right.
the song is writing from that immediate moment where it's over, but just barely. There's still this like glimmer of hope.
Yeah, I feel like she doesn't really know that it's over.
Yeah.
It's like this, wait a second, I'm waking up, but I'm not awake.
This, I think, what might be transitioning into the next song, but there's an interesting and compelling use of metaphors throughout this album of, is love worth it? I think is a question we hear a lot in this album.
It's the tortured in the Tortured Poets department. I was the one that put in the next song. It's track 5, So Long London. Of course it's a track 5, so it's track 5ing. But this one is by Taylor Swift and Aaron Dessner. I think here, once again, we're exploring a relationship, and I definitely think you do see that question of, was the relationship worth it? This song is initially pretty sad. The reason that I chose it for metaphors, I think it's obvious in the title, but then there's also sub-metaphors within the song. London is, of course, a city. That's not what she's talking about in this song. London is a metaphor for a relationship. She's saying bye to the city, but more importantly, she's saying bye to that entire relationship. She's saying bye to a person. When she says specifically, you'll find someone, she's not saying the city of London is going to find someone. Obviously, she's saying the person in question here will find someone and be okay. But there's other metaphors within this too. The relationship is really what is being turned into a metaphor here. So you have things like pulled him in tighter each time he was drifting away. My spine split from carrying us up the hill, wet through my clothes, weary bones caught the chill. There's a weight that she is dragging on. It's like a burden. She's pulling it. It was drifting away and she pulls it back. And that is the weight of this person in this relationship weighing heavy on her, the emotional state. And then there's a interesting play on words, but it's still a metaphor where she says, you say I abandoned the ship, but I was going down with it, my white knuckled dying grip. Ship is oftentimes used to be an abbreviated form of relationship, but ship is also a physical ship. And in this case, the way that it's going down with the ship is like the captain goes down with the ship. And you're making a metaphor here to an actual physical ship. So she's got London as a metaphor, and then she's using the song through different metaphors within this song to describe the relationship and the person that she's leaving behind.
We talked about this in our metaphors episode, where why does she use metaphors and what's the value in that? We can't necessarily relate to the exact experiences that she has had, but when you use a metaphor, it makes it instantly more relatable. So if she had said exactly what happened in her own experience, that would be something that is really only relatable to her. But saying, you sacrificed us to the gods of your bluest days, I died on the altar waiting for the proof, you can feel what that must feel like.
Yeah.
And that is why metaphors are so powerful in poetry and in song, and it's what makes Taylor Swift's songs in particular so relatable, even though we lead very different lives.
Yeah, I think when going back to the two parts of the metaphor, if we have like the tenor and the vehicle, the tenor here would be the actual relationship, and the vehicle that's being used is a city. It could be a ship, it could be a few different things actually, but all of this allows the listener to very quickly understand the burden that she was feeling, what she is leaving behind, what she's cutting off, and maybe the lightness that follows that. You can really experience these things in the way that it's described.
Well, and the images that she uses to do several things. One, it tells you how momentous and how important this person was. This is not, London is not a small city. London's a really big, really important city that's has a complex history as well. That leads us to a lot. A ship, not a small thing. And if you're the captain of the ship willing to go down with it, there's a lot of love there. Captains love their ships.
Yeah.
Yet they still go down sometimes. Just all of these images immediately give us this understanding. If we compare it to Down Bad, using an alien abduction, we immediately got out of this world, confusing, kind of scary, kind of cool. And then using a city, a ship, and the relationships there, she doesn't have to sit and explain, okay, here's the nuance difference. Okay, so this was like really important to me. She uses these metaphors and we just intuitively understand, oh, okay, I know where you're going with this. I can connect to that. There's actually a really good argument that we as humans only learn through metaphor. We take something we know and compare it to something new, and then that's how we make those connections to new things, which is a really interesting concept to consider on the whole. But if you see that here, we don't have to have been in the relationship. It could even not. It's probably about a relationship based on the way the song goes, but it could be other things. We do this so much where we take these metaphors, I say we as in the three of us in this podcast, and we apply it to completely different parts of our lives. And that's the power of a really good metaphor. It's going to capture something that you can then make these connections. Like you were saying, Jody, we don't have to experience it exactly as she is to understand it because of these metaphors. And it has so many purposes.
Yeah, I think we're obviously not doing a deep dive here, but I actually don't think that there's anything here explicitly. Oh, I guess in the bridge, there's a little bit of a giveaway, but I was saying it doesn't even need to be a romantic relationship here. I think it's definitely a relationship, but I think it's debatable whether it needs to be a romantic relationship. So that's just further. And the way that the metaphor is, what it's really communicating is the weight, the heaviness, the toll, the negativity. It's not necessarily going into the details of what
And
kind of
doesn't need to.
relationship. It doesn't need to. No, it's just trying to communicate the weight, really, is what I'm seeing.
So I have a different, very left turn in the next song, but also leaving an ending of relationship. We're going back to Fresh Out the Slammer, track 7. This is written by Jack and Taylor, and we've talked about this song before on previous episodes because it's one of those that just it's relatable in many, many contexts. Here, Taylor is using, so if I back up, Fresh Out the Slammer is a slang term for prison. So she's talking about getting out of prison. And this song in particular is a sustained or extended metaphor relating the relationship that she was in, that she's getting out of, to one that is a prison, that is trapped. And this makes me think of a couple things. First is that in our original metaphors episode, we talked about getaway car, right? And how that was a metaphor for leaving a relationship. And here we have another one, Fresh Out the Slammer, metaphor for leaving a relationship.
Ooh, and they're both crime-related
Crimes,
metaphors.
They're both
yeah.
crime-related.
Hmm.
Yes. So I thought that was very interesting. We also did a deep dive on Getaway Car in episode 14, which we loved. That might be one. I mean, every episode is my favorite, but that's a really good one. Go back and listen to as well. The other thing this reminds me of, also reputation coded, he can be my jailer, Burton to this Taylor. So the jailer, she's now escaping. She's fresh out of the slammer. What I think is interesting about the song is it says more about the relationship she is leaving than it does about the person she's running to now that she's out. The song itself in the lyrics says like now, I mean, the first lyric is now pretty baby, I'm running back home to you, fresh out the slammer. I know who my first call will be to. But the song isn't about the person she's running to. The song is about, as a metaphor for how she was feeling in the relationship itself. And again, I go back to what I was just saying about So Long London. She's never really saying what happened to her. She's using further metaphors to explain how she felt. Handcuffed to the spell I was under. Years of labor, locks and ceilings. I did my time. It's just a very heavy, you get the sense of a very heavy, dark, trapped, locked away. And I go back to, again, when we look at I guess this is the meaning behind the image, or
Tenor.
is she implying that she was guilty? I go back to guilty as sin, right? If you're put in prison, you could either you've done something wrong and you're guilty, or maybe it's wrongful imprisonment. I don't really know. I don't know if the song really gives us that, but what we do see is this idea of being stuck, being trapped, not being able to get out. And then at the end, finally, I did my time. I've paid my dues. I've learned a lesson.
I love your reputation call out earlier because I'm within the song now seeing parallels between the getaway car, of course, but also call it what you want. It's you're the one I'm running to. And I don't know what this all means, but it's just the fact that we've seen that exact dynamic once.
Maybe it means
before.
reputation is TV is coming.
Yeah, that's what I
No.
I'm like, maybe on the 13th day of the 13th month.
13.
But again, I think it's sorry. The idea.
Maybe this album is Reputation because it's also black and white. It's a white heart. Reputation.
Okay. Pause. Prison is another one of those very it's not relatable, but recognizable.
Universal term.
It's a universal, it's recognizable metaphor to use immediately. You feel trapped, something's wrong, can't get out.
It's loaded. It is a
Very
loaded
loaded.
metaphor to use. Yeah. It is, she does say, I did my time, which can still mean wrongful imprisonment, but an owning up to it voluntarily, saying, yeah, I did my time.
I've paid my dues.
Could imply some guilt. Mm-hmm.
It could. I've paid my dues. I've learned my lesson. Like, I now know what that is like.
It also could imply waiting. Like, I did my time patiently waiting. I don't know why.
Yeah, there's a time element there.
I'm thinking about Sirius Black screaming, I did my time, 12 years of it. And it's just, like, you put in the time, you waited, now you've earned whatever's coming next in some regard.
Yeah, it's a really, this song, we've now talked about it a couple of times. I think it's one that I want to sit with more because it is an incredibly loaded metaphor. whether she meant to or not, creates so many layers here. I think this would be someday a deep dive that would be worth our time.
Absolutely. We should probably do a prison episode now because we got a lot of those.
Or just just a crime episode.
Yeah.
Crime.
That sounds fun. Cool. Well, I have the next song. It's track 19. So once again, jumping now out of the original TTPD album to the anthology, the extended tracks. Track 19 is called The Albatross, and it's by Taylor Swift and Aaron Dessner. The albatross is a very famous metaphor that has been used many times in music. It originally came from poetry. It can be traced back to Greek mythology. Albatross is a bird, and the song is not literally about a bird. The albatross is a metaphor for a few different things, and I can go through it. But one thing I did want to acknowledge is that it's an allusion to a work of literary work that came before. There's a poem by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who I believe is one of the Romantics.
Correct.
And
was he one of the Lakes poets, or
he's
was he
one of
just
the
one
Lakes
the
poets,
Yep.
actually. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
We love our
And-
Lakes poets.
Yeah, and we know Taylor loves her Lakes poets too. So he wrote a poem called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and I think the Wikipedia article where I just looked this up briefly said that this is the most quoted and misquoted poem, which is just a fun fact. But it tells a story of a sailor who basically shoots a friendly albatross. So point to be noticed was the albatross is a bird and it was friendly. And then in doing that, he curses himself and his crew. And so as a punishment, he has to wear the bird around his neck. And it's a symbol of burden and regret. A lot of times you hear the albatross being referred to as something heavy, something that's weighing you down. That kind of gets at the burden. So knowing all of that, the albatross is really a metaphor for an immense burden. I think it's also important to keep in mind that it was a bird with friendly intentions. So in this song, there are lyrics where she talks about sweeping in. So I cross my thoughtless heart, spread my wings like a parachute. A parachute is something that saves somebody. That's another metaphor there. And then she says, I'm the albatross. I swept in at the rescue. The devil that you know looks more like an angel now. And so it's this idea that she had good intentions. She was friendly. She was coming to actually save somebody. She was like a parachute or like a lifeline. And then the albatross is ultimately shot and becomes this big burden. And so she will live like a burden on this person.
There's also a lot of projection that happens here too. Like you said, it's innocent. It makes me think of, I want to say it's when we discussed Gold Rush, we talked a little bit about sirens and just the comparison there of if you replace everything in the song Albatross with like a siren, it actually would line up pretty well. Yes, sirens are temptresses. They are there to kill you. However, again, in the metaphor, why this image, she chose the albatross, which is, yes, referring to all these other things, but again, did not have malicious intentions. It's a male projection of malevolence onto the innocent creature.
Yes. And how that will weigh heavy on somebody's conscience. I think that's the other side of it, is these actions that you took, the way that you treated the albatross will now weigh heavy on your conscience because it was such a wrong thing to do that you'll have to live with that burden. There's the whole story that's being told here through this metaphor.
I need to deep dive this one. I like this song a lot, and I find lines and lyrics that really resonate, but would love to deep dive it to get more to the meaning behind the metaphor and what she's really trying to convey here in a deep dive.
Yeah, this is, I mean, just the fact that we're referencing the Coleridge poem is already AP level.
Already AP level. Let's have that poem side by side with the lyrics. That sounds like a good episode for our fall semester.
Yeah. But on the other end of the spectrum, Jody, you want to take us to the next song?
Well, since it's AP, I feel so high school every time we do this podcast. I'm talking about So High School, track 22, written by Taylor Swift and Aaron Dessner. The fact that Aaron Dessner is credited as a writer on So High School.
Adorable.
It
I love
just
for him.
cracks me up every time because I imagine him sitting there going, you want me to talk about spin the bottle and kiss, marry, kill?
Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto and American Pie? Cool. Great.
He's a very complex man.
He's a man of many talents, including Grand Theft Auto. So high school, it's a metaphor for just falling in love and bringing her back to young love. I mean, I don't know how much we need to go into this because it feels very straightforward to me. What I was looking up was
Did Taylor Swift go to high school? Because that's what I wanted to
no,
search.
I didn't. We know she went to high school. She didn't graduate from her actual high school. I think she got a GED, but yeah, she did go to high school. The use of so in a metaphor, English professor Jen, is that formally signifying a metaphor, or like is it similar to using like or as?
I, in this context, have always I don't think universally, no, that's not, I wouldn't say that. However, in this context, I read it as leaning into the metaphor because in
Right.
high school, you'd be like, oh my God, it's so this. It to me comes across as leaning into the high school language of this is so high
Colloquialism.
school.
So high school.
Yes,
This is
colloquialism.
So AP Taylor
Yeah.
Swift. Got it.
That's so fetch.
That's so fetch. Stop trying to make fetch happen. Anyway, she does that a lot. This is definitely another extended metaphor where she brings in the language of high school. Bittersweet 16 suddenly. She brings in all the high school games, truth or dare, spin the bottle, kiss, marry, kill. And just you get the feeling of being transported back into high school. And again, she's using this as a metaphor for feeling in love, that young love, that giddiness, that carefreeness. I think it's a very, again, meaning behind the metaphor. High school is I know it feels like a life or death time in your life, and like everything is big and crazy, but it's also a time where you have really no actual responsibilities. You're not yet an adult. Life is a bit more carefree, and the love or falling in love is also a lot more innocent and just fun and exciting and doesn't come with the pressures of adulthood and an adult relationship.
I saw a graph that somebody shared on Instagram the other day of statistically people are most nostalgic and most fond of the music that they heard when they're 17. And as they get older, they start liking the music less and less and less. And you kind of get stuck in that time. And statistically, they asked many different generations, and for every generation it was the music from around the time they were 17 is the music that they favored the most. So when you
John
talk
Mayer.
to,
Is that controversial to say at a Taylor Swift podcast?
I mean, it doesn't have to be just one artist, but it's the general style and genre and the sound of that time. So you talk to millennials and we're always reminiscent about somewhere between 90s and 2000s music, and it's like, well, yeah, that's when we were teenagers and like that transition from high school to college. And so I think that 17 is very much peak high school, and it is not only the music that you view through rose-colored glasses, you view that entire time of your life that way. And I think it's such a great universal way for her to once again talk about this feeling, because anyone can immediately relate to that time in their lives, and you kind of, whether you found love or not in that moment, you get the giddiness or you get that innocence.
Yes and no. I will say I lead my high school's alumni board. And so I'm very nostalgic and absolutely love high school, but I talk to a lot of classmates or people who went there long before or long after, and not everybody has positive associations with high school.
Well, I guess I'm not talking about the positive association. I think I'm talking about the carefreeness of that feeling, like the giddy kind of feel, like, because not everybody finds love this way or has this kind of a relationship experience in high school, but I think that innocence, lack of responsibilities, maybe carefreeness.
For those of us who were fortunate enough to have no responsibilities in high school, absolutely. And I think that's what possibly Taylor is relating to. Although to your earlier point, like, did she go to high school? She did. She didn't graduate from high school, formal high school. She got a GED, but I think that's what makes it also even more interesting, her in particular use of all of this high school imagery, because this is probably not stuff that she was doing at 16, because she was
Touring. Yeah.
But a lot of these things are not like, it's like, which aspects are we focusing on? We're not necessarily focusing on like having to wait tables or earn money or like homework. We're focusing on truth or dare.
Truth or dare and you know, watching American Pie on a Saturday night. Like, no, she was touring the world. But I think that's what gives the metaphor even more interest and meaning, that like now at this point in her life, with this where she is right now, feeling this way.
Right. You feel
And to your point, I think what you were trying to say is like, you feeling so high school doesn't have to just happen in high
Right.
school. You can have these emotions and these feelings at any point in your life. They just happen to, for many people, have happened in high school.
I have always felt like this was a risky metaphor to use
Ooh.
because it comes across so good, so positive. Yet, if I had a friend tell me that they felt like they were back in high school with how they felt about someone, I don't know if I would take that as a good thing.
And that's the other thing I was trying to bring up. Again, not everybody has positive associations, but I think the way the lyrics in the song, positive, the music, positive. And so this is for her, and the way she is writing this song, a positive metaphor and a positive association.
Yeah, I think I'm fixated less on the positive or negative and more on the simple versus complex. High school is a time where everything is simple. It should be, right. And but like once you go to college, you're getting, I don't know, more cerebral, you have more finance, debts, whatever, responsibilities start to pile on, but you go back to a time where, and that's not to say that some people don't have responsibilities in high school. They absolutely do.
Right. But adulthood
is a trap. Right. And so this is like that edge of adulthood. It's in Catcher in the Rye. It's that moment right before you grow up. It's the moment before you're forced into society as a functioning adult. And so rather than happy or sad or whatever, because high school is a whirlwind roller coaster ride of emotions, but there is a simplicity to it. And the things that she lists here of Sweet 16, ball, Aristotle, like the games, no matter whether you were touring or anything at that time, that's your life.
Yeah.
You don't really have perception beyond kind of some of these things. And the things that she chooses to focus on specifically are like the most mundane of high school things. I think high schoolers everywhere can relate. All of us have played a game of spin the bottle, or like a game of truth or dare with somebody, or like you know exactly what that feeling is.
Or you've watched an American movie about high school and you're like, cool, got it.
Yeah, again, death of the author, her intentions don't really matter to me, but I think all of those things are true, and I still feel like it was a risky metaphor to use to get that message across, because yes, it's a simpler time, but it's also a super immature time.
Yeah.
And it's so fun and it's so sweet, but it's one of those things where like, that's wonderful. Let's check up again in a year and see.
I mean, but what if that is part of the intention?
That's the part. I think that's part of it, right? That like at this capture this moment in time, this is the feeling.
I think you're trying to deliberately confuse. If this is the choice that you make to use this metaphor, I think you're trying to talk about something that's potentially surface level, shallow. We're not talking about an everlasting, really deep love. You're talking about something that is fun in the moment, maybe, but like,
and it's again capturing a moment in time, that in this moment in time I feel so high school. Here are all the things that I feel.
I don't disagree with you, but I don't think I feel as positively about the metaphor as you guys do.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
Well, we'll move on to the last song, which is very dark and not as enjoyable as that, so be it. The song I wanted to talk about, the last song, is Cassandra, which is track 27, written by Taylor Swift and Aaron Dessner. I think there's two sort of metaphors going on in this song. And again, like Down Bad, my main point of this is what's happening here? I don't have any answers. The two metaphors we have is, one, she's often in a tower, a house, a jail cell. So there's this constant metaphor of her location being enclosed, seems isolated, at least isolated from town, isolated from society. And she's usually minding her own business until the song develops later on. But it starts out, I was in my new house, placing daydreams, patching up the crack along the wall. And then later on, though, she's in her tower weaving nightmares, twisting all my smiles into snarls. So we have this metaphor of separation, of being inside a place. Of course, she has been in her own home in life. So, but the metaphor is being in a tower, placing daydreams, these kinds of things. And then I don't even know if it's an exact metaphor as much as it is a reference, but I think she's trying to tie these two things together. The reference to Cassandra, who is a mythological character in the Battle of Troy, if you think of the Trojan horse. So Cassandra could see into the future, but she was cursed by one of the gods, I don't remember which one, that no one would believe her. So she knew the truth, she could see what was coming, but no one would ever believe her. The most famous example of that is she knew the Trojan horse, what it was, that it was full of soldiers. And so she told everyone, don't let this in, don't let this in. Yet they did. And that ultimately is what led to the downfall of Troy. I don't know why the combination of these things are happening. I understand the message. The message of the song, in my opinion, is that she was kind of doing her own thing, was trying not to bother anyone, but then was telling the truth. She was being honest and no one believed her, and people are rioting outside the house. And so it's this idea of telling the truth and being honest. The mob of the public, people love to hate, but then the truth is so quiet, people don't care about that part as much. I understand that, but the combination of these metaphors, why?
I mean, I think tower and house can sometimes be like into a prison, perhaps, or a high point, like you're trapped somewhere high up, separated from society, maybe. So maybe it signals
separated
loneliness and isolation. And then the fact that the whole story of Cassandra that comes with this, to me, this song is really, it feels like it's a metaphor that's trying to communicate loneliness and isolation, because she was physically maybe isolated, but then also nobody was listening to her, or maybe she was not being heard properly, which also creates a different kind of loneliness.
It feels similar to Down Bad in that respect. The idea, the metaphors also both playing with isolation and not being believed or not being heard. If I go back to the metaphor in Down Bad of the alien abduction as something that not every people have to see to believe, and they don't really believe you, and using Cassandra as someone that they didn't believe, no one wanted to believe what she was saying, and how isolating that is. I just think it's interesting that both the songs you chose have this isolation and disbelief.
I'll bring it up in therapy.
Some of the imagery I get, I
Great.
think of the way the song opens of her being trapped in that tower, patching up the crack, losing track of what she's saying. I think of Rapunzel
Yeah.
a little bit, because you're just isolated in that sense. And then I don't remember if Cassandra in mythology was trapped in a tower, but basically everyone thought that she was crazy. And so not only did they not listen to what she said, but she was just kind of shunned.
Not believed.
And ostracized maybe by the society. I also think of a very famous literary interpretation of Cassandra, which is Professor Trelawney in the Harry Potter series, who was literally in this tower in a corner. And that's kind of where Trelawney haunted the little astronomy tower. And was it the astronomy tower?
Yeah, she's definitely in the tower.
And of course, nobody believed her either, but she was also portrayed as being this crazy character. And so in this situation, I just think the combination of the two is really creating that sense of isolationism, but also ostracization, maybe.
Yeah, so the side-by-side comparison, there's different versions of the second half, but so they killed Cassandra first because she feared the worst and tried to tell the town. So they set my life in flames. I regret to say, do you believe me now? So there's this clear side-by-side. But they didn't kill Cassandra first in the myth. Cassandra survives the fall of Troy. She dies later. I really like this song, but I'm very confused by some of the choices.
I think we talked about doing a mythology episode, and I think it'll be worth unpacking in that. But I do think that by itself, maybe the killing Cassandra itself is also a metaphor for not literally
not listening to her, putting her in her place.
Yeah, they definitely did get very upset with her when she said, because they all thought this Trojan horse was this incredible sign of their victory. And she's saying, no, this is going to be what kills you. And they were very upset with it.
It feels like a witch hunt, right? Like, you predicted this, therefore you're the one to blame, even though she's like, I tried to warn you.
Yeah, it's when it's burn the bitch, they're shrieking. When the truth comes out, it's quiet. So I think the witch metaphor is also very much tied in there as well. I think all of these metaphors come together. Well, one, they're very gendered. That's definitely something going on here. But that the mob literally in the song that there's essentially a mob, but metaphorically referring to perhaps just the public discourse loves to be angry, burn the bitch, they're shrieking. But when a woman is proven to be correct, it's very quiet. The damage is already done, even if you were telling the truth, because the public didn't like what you were saying, I think is what it's getting to. It's a lot of complicated metaphorical images woven together that I think gets there. I see a lot of pain in this song.
Oh, yeah. And the music itself also lends to that. It's very slow, and that's the extent of my musical knowledge.
Yeah, I definitely think this is one we should revisit during the semester.
Deep dive.
Yeah.
Deep dive.
I almost did it for Marxism last week because the line blood's thick, but nothing like a payroll.
Nothing like a payroll. Oof.
We could spend hours on that line alone.
Oh my God. That's probably a good place for us to stop. Otherwise, I'm going to get in trouble for anything I say on this podcast.
Well, on that depressing ending, metaphors are fun.
Yeah, go back and listen to episode 13 if you found this engaging and if you want to revisit other metaphors that we found in Taylor's music.
Join us next time as we go and revisit another one of our show and tells on another summer school episode of AP Taylor Swift.
That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on social at AP Taylor Swift to stay up to date, and join us next time as we overanalyze and deep dive into the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.